Welcome to the inaugural episode of the Margin Line podcast. I'm Joe Lynch, head of customer success at Dandy.
And I'm Dan Hanover, co-founder at Dandy.
The show is all about peeling back the layers of how technology is revolutionizing dentistry, especially in partnership with DSOs and ambitious private practices.
We want to give you the inside scoop on what actually happens in the lab, the challenges we're facing, the advances we're making, and the stories that matter most for our doctors and their patients.
Dan, you've shared that your prolonged dental experiences growing up inspired you. Can you walk us through your personal challenges with multi-specialist care and how it influenced your mission and ultimately your ambition to start Dandy?
My dental situation growing up was actually quite challenging. I had one lateral that was a peg lateral, which for those of you who don't know, it means it came in as a bit of a mini tooth. And I had another lateral that was actually congenitally missing. And these two issues created a bit of a cascading set of issues that led to a ton of malocclusion in my mouth. And I also have my jaws are rotated clockwise. My midlines are not properly aligned. So I had a lot of dental care growing up, and I was frankly passed between a number of different doctors and specialists to try and solve this problem. Care for me involved implant planning, involved bridges, involved braces, metal braces, and clear aligners. I've also had somewhat relatedly, somewhat unrelatedly, tons of issues with gum recession and surgery for that as well. So I've really been through the ringer, you might say. I've been seeing dentist after dentist for about 12 to 15 years now.
Wow. And
I think this experience has really exposed me to a lot of the issues and challenges that both practitioners and patients face when dealing with, complex restorative care. And that was, frankly, a large part of my initial inspiration for really thinking about how we can make this industry better, for sure.
When you think about that today and what you're building at Dandy, is there a particular patient experience or doctor experience that you're uniquely driven to solve based on your childhood?
Reflecting on my own experience as a patient, I always found the process of getting this type of care very opaque. And that's not just a patient experience, but at least that's how I experienced it. I didn't really know what the process was going to be to get from my situation to my desired outcome. And for me, it was complex enough that would have been very helpful. It was a very multi-step process. I felt like it wasn't always super clear to me what the outcome was going to look like. I had to do a lot of work myself to find multiple providers and manually coordinate them, and manually coordinate my own care, be my own advocate as a patient. And it became very clear to me the sheer amount of work that I was doing and the amount of mental and emotional load I had to go through to coordinate and advocate my own care. That's a problem I'd really, really love to solve. We're doing a lot of work actually solving it at Dandy. I think one of the key themes that certainly became very clear was, the specialization of dental care really hurt for me. The fact that it had to be one doctor doing the implant surgery, a different doctor, an orthodontist doing the clear aligners, a different doctor placing the crown on my peg lateral, a different doctor, being my primary care physician for dental care. I mean, I was coordinating between 4 different doctors. And you and I both know, everybody watching this knows, there's no system for managing that.
Yeah.
It's just, you got four people.
Yeah.
Just coordinating on one case. And for me, making sure doctor number 2 had the context from doctor number 1 was a function of me remembering to ask doctor number 1 for a printout of the information and remembering to bring it to my point with doctor number 2. Not to mention, and I wasn't really privy to this at the time, but not to mention the obvious challenges that I'm sure those doctors were facing dealing with their dental labs.
Sure.
Trying to make sure that whatever were the the custom made pieces that they were getting for my case were all fitting together like a jigsaw puzzle. Even though we all know those dental labs are definitely not talking to each other. So yeah, that definitely was an eye-opening experience for me. And it's one that I'm really excited that we're solving.
Yeah, it's an incredible story. So you think about starting Dandy, you start Dandy, you meet your co-founder, Tony,
Yeah.
Tony Alacco, the other co-founder of Dandy.
Yeah.
Tell me, like, how did this start? Like, what were the early debates? How did you start the partnership? Like, how did you figure out that you were going to challenge or complement each other?
Yeah. So I was introduced to Tony in college by my now ex-girlfriend, girlfriend at the time. And it was very clear to me, Tony was a very unique individual. Yeah. Tony was a very unique individual. And
what stood out? Like, what makes Tony most unique?
Yeah. I mean, Tony's very charismatic. Tony's also very smart. And one thing I definitely saw that we had in common very early on that was probably the most positive signal that it was going to be a really great partnership was he was also, he was also very visionary. When we talked about this business, when we talked about what it could be, we really spoke very much in terms of the future.
Yeah.
It's funny because in the beginning, back then we were building a different type of business. So I wouldn't say we were talking a ton about the impact we'd have in the dental lab space specifically. But I definitely took note of some character traits that I thought were I was really excited to work with.
So you started a different business. You started buying a scanner off eBay. Happened to be broken.
The original business, I'll fill you guys in, was basically a competitor to a company that I'm sure many of our listeners have heard of called Smile Direct Club. But we had a bit of a unique twist on it, which was that, instead of it being fully patient driven, we wanted it to still be governed by a dentist. And the rationale for those of you who are familiar with clear aligners is when you have a actual doctor in the loop, you can achieve better outcomes. You can do certain procedures like attachments and IPR that are otherwise impossible with a fully consumerized model. And also, there was the very small but relevant fact that in many states it was legally very treacherous to do the model that Smile Direct Club was doing. And I just felt like having a doctor in the loop would be a better patient experience and better for everybody involved. That business was a lot of fun, but it wasn't very successful. It was not very successful. And one of the main reasons why it was unsuccessful is because you had this supply demand problem. You needed a ton of doctors signed up before you could even, market to patients. Through that experience, we learned a lot about the field of dentistry. And we frankly learned a lot about digital dentistry because as part of that business, we were training a ton of doctors how to use intraoral scanners, which at the time were not as prolific or proliferated as they are today. And so it was through that experience, later on, after that business didn't work, we were reflecting on what we had learned there. And we wanted to start out by thinking about that sort of digital component. And, we had reflected and remembered that a lot of doctors had actually asked us if they could send us their restorative work, not just their clear aligner work. We'd initially said no, because we're like, no, just send us those juicy clear aligners, those incredibly high margin, juicy clear aligners. Don't give us any of this crown stuff.
Yeah.
But then after that business had run its course, we reflected and did our research and learned a lot more about the dental lab industry and realized that it was actually a really, really compelling opportunity to make an impact. And not only financially for Dandy, but also that was when I realized this could be a mechanism to solve that core problem that I had dealt with, in a more deep way than I'd originally imagined I would be able to solve.
Interesting. And so from your perspective, right, it sounds like teaching customers, working directly with customers, iterating and pivoting based on customer feedback, that's just a core part of how you operate, how Tony operates. And it feels like it's resonated throughout the Dandy DNA as well. Was that intentional?
So I think that there are really two key ingredients to great leadership. The first one is ambition, and the second one is reflection. And I think both are equally important. A company that is incredibly ambitious, but does not listen to its customers, listen to its employees, listen to its investors, listen to its stakeholders. That company, I think, will go places. There are plenty of companies actually like that have done well. But if you look at the companies that have really transformed their industries, they are companies that are very ambitious, but they are constantly listening to feedback in the places where they should be listening to feedback and incorporating that feedback into making what are sometimes challenging decisions. That was a challenging decision for us to effectively, shut down and start from scratch. Very, very challenging decision. But because we were listening to customers, because we were listening to the signals that the market was giving us, and we were paying attention to the clinical reality of what we were doing, it was a decision that we were able to make with confidence. And if we had not made that decision, I just don't, we'd be in a much worse spot as a company.
It's interesting. You often hear about ambition. You definitely hear much less about reflection. You started this business out of college. Like, was there a particular mentor or a person who influenced that? Did you read it somewhere, or is this just like naturally how you stumbled through problems before?
When you look at the history of the company, so the answer is no. I mean, this is definitely not something I had intuited in college. That's what you're asking. This is something that I say now based on our experience building this company. Because I'll tell you, when Tony and I started this business, we definitely had a lot of ambition, and we continue to have a lot of ambition. I think we always had an intuition that it would take more than just ambition to, get from here to there. I think everybody kind of intuitively gets that. Building a really great company is multifaceted. But as time has gone on, and I just reflect on the last 5 years of building this company, and I think about what were the key ingredients that led us to get here beyond, wanting it really badly and having really ambitious goals and pushing ourselves really hard. I just think about the times in the company's history where we made critical decisions that if we had not made them, the company would be in a very, very different spot. And I think about what would have happened if we didn't make those decisions. And that leads me to the conclusion that the second sort of key ingredient is reflection. Because if we didn't make those decisions, we just continued along that path. Like I can play it out in my head. I know what would have happened if we had continued trying to build that original business. I know what would have happened if we had not listened to customers and continued to build things that didn't resonate. We would have worked really hard, and the ROI just wouldn't have been there.
Yeah. When you think about our audience here and DSO executives and ambitious general dentists, how do you think that lesson and reflection applies to their enterprise or their own practices?
I definitely think, one thing that's given me a lot of energy throughout the years, one of the things that I really love about this industry is meeting really ambitious dentists and small and mid-sized practice owners. That's been a recurring joy for me. Is I meet a dentist who graduated dental school like 5 or so years ago, and relatively early in their career they figure out what's going on, they figure out what it takes to succeed in the industry, and they've built for themselves like a mini local empire of 5 to 15 dental practices. And they're talking to me about how they've got 3 more deals on their plate that they're ready to execute. And they're telling me about the things that they're doing and the unique value that they're able to offer to their customers because they notice something. I've noticed they've always noticed something.
Sure.
I'll never forget the first instance of this I'm remembering is a dentist on the East Coast, an orthodontist on the East Coast who had, I think, a string of 8 to 10 orthodontic practices, metal braces only, no aligners, metal braces only. I remember this distinctly. And his key insight about customers was he noticed that the lower income population in his metropolitan area was deeply underserved. And so he came to the market. He was like, no Invisalign, no clear aligners. I think back at this point in time, clear aligners were more expensive. So he was like, no expensive clear aligners, none of that stuff. We're going to do it the classic, simple way. Metal brackets and wires, going to be a volume shop, and we're going to do it really cheap. We're going to do it cheap, we're going to do it right. And that philosophy was able to build him relatively quickly a business of, I think at the time he had maybe 8 or 10 orthodontic offices, and he was planning to expand it to 20 within the next year and a half.
Wow.
That gives me a lot of energy. But that's also an example of a guy, clearly he's ambitious. I could tell he's ambitious. He's talking about acquiring 10 more dental practices in a year. But he was also a guy who'd actually listen. It's clear he listened, He listened to customers. He listened to patients. He listened to what the market was telling him. And he, I'm sure at one point had to adjust his strategy and, into that niche that he found for himself based on that reflection. So I think it's very important everywhere. And I see that combination in really successful entrepreneurs in the dental industry all the time.
Yeah. I have the same story. Also this one's clear aligners, but a practice in Pittsburgh that I went and visited 3 weeks ago, Dr. Barry. He actually markets his aligners almost no margin.
Oh, wow.
And his insight was there is a population that is underserved, which is college students and young professionals who, when they pull out their aligners, start to talk about their aligners because it's a natural point of conversation within that audience.
It markets itself.
And what he ends up building is a long-term view of what his book can become. And it's just a fascinating way to build a business, and his practice is thriving based on that insight. And he does the same for dentures so that he can actually just work with customers for a long time on the belief that if I don't have to market and continually build a new patient base, he can serve them forever, and the economics actually work out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great example. He clearly noticed something that like all of us listening to this, like we know there's no way the majority of his competitors in his local area noticed that too. Like he's definitely probably the only person there doing that, and it's really great.
Yeah. And so when you think about reflecting on customer feedback, how do you embed those reflections into the product? How does that drive technical innovation?
So look, my opinion about this sort of stuff is companies have to do a lot of things. Like you just think about corporations. Like Invisalign is out there doing a lot of things.
Yep.
You know, Dentsply Sirona, they have a lot. They got to do finance. They got to do marketing. They got to do sales. They got to do product. They got to do a lot of stuff, right? One of the things I've always felt is true is one of the things that a lot of companies do less of as they grow, generally speaking, is they tend to listen to customers less as a portion of all the people they're listening to. Mm-hmm. This is a natural thing because when you're a very small company, you're like 4 or 5 people. You got your like 3 coworkers that are like literally all of your coworkers is like those three people. And then who you're going to talk to besides those 3 people, you're going to talk to customers. So when you're a really small company, it's very natural to talk to customers all the time.
Yeah.
Become a large company. Now you don't have 3 coworkers, you have 3,000 coworkers. It's a lot of context you probably want to get caught up on. There's like meetings happening and like you want to be in those meetings. There's people you want to like know how to think about things. When you want to do anything, there's like 7 different stakeholder people that you need to loop in to make sure it's done properly. So there's a lot more voices in the room that crowd out the customer.
Sure, you got to write your TPS report.
Yeah, you got to write your TPS report. Yeah. You got to present your MBR.
Yep.
My philosophy has always been it's whatever you can do to make sure that in the ocean of these new voices, the customers doesn't get drowned out. That's the thing you got to do to make sure you're able to continue to iterate in your product in a way that will resonate with the market. And I think if you really want to know why a lot of companies, as they scale, it feels like they lose touch with the customers that made them so successful to begin with. I think it's this dynamic. And one of the things that Danny, that we've tried really hard, and I think we've succeeded to some degree to do, is to not let that happen to us and to keep a culture of talking to customers, especially on the product side, which is where we're making a lot of these crucial decisions that impact our customers. Now, as an anecdote here, I mean, I make a point to call at least a few dozen customers every quarter. What we do is we have a team where we prioritize talking to customers constantly. And that team is the team that makes decisions about our product. And by keeping those 2 things close together, the people who talk to customers are also the people who are making decisions about our product. That's how we make sure that we keep that loop tight. And we make sure we're actually incorporating customer feedback into the product. That's the way I think about that.
Is there a unique innovation that you believe has come from being closer to customers than the broader lab industry or the broader industry?
I don't know, Joe. Do you have one in mind?
Yeah, we're talking about it on the drive up here.
Yeah,
I think, and frankly, for maybe a little bit too long, we avoided building live design.
It's true.
We had a somewhat naive hypothesis that we could perfect design and incrementally improve quality when our customers were telling us, I just want to speak to the designer. And, the naive version of that is, great, let's talk to a lab technician. They'll take, your notes and we'll pass it to the designer who's working on that case. We'll manufacture it, we'll ship it back out. And what we actually learned as we got closer and closer to the customer and the specific workflows and the specific pain points is, well, they wanted to actually sometimes iterate on the design. They wanted to see what it would look like if it was 0.5 millimeter shorter, or The line angles were slightly adjusted.
Yep.
And that iterative loop is, I think, one of the most valuable parts of the product today, which is a customer can speak to a lab tech. They can work directly on the design and know with extreme confidence that what they see and see on their screen and what they've worked directly with their lab partner on is what they're going to get, what they're going to be able to see, and ultimately like drive a great patient outcome. So to me, like that's an example of, being close to customers allowed us to invent new technology, deploy it, test it, iterate it, and then continuously improve it.
That's a good example. Another one that comes to mind is a product that we're launching now called AI Scan Review, which I know you're familiar with, but for those who may not be, again, this was an innovation that was bred from customer conversations. Customers told us, it's really important that when I scan a patient, I don't have to bring them back in again later because there was an issue with the scan. This is a very common problem I have with many labs. And so we built software that basically checks the scan to make sure it's a high quality and good scan that will be designed properly. And we actually tell the doctor, we give them that feedback while the patient's in the chair, so they can, if they need to, make those changes then and there without having to bring the patient back in later. Again, something that has never really existed in the industry before, but having some conversations with customers, you realize just how powerful that thing can be. And it's not like we are the first company capable of building such a thing. Mm-hmm. So I think it speaks to the power of those customer conversations. Yeah.
AI is a thing. You just brought up AI Scan Review. When we speak to DSO execs in our MBRs now, it's often a topic of conversation. They're worried about it in revenue cycle management, how they're thinking about their PMS integration. How are you thinking about AI at Dandy?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple ways that AI really can have a big impact on, is already having a big impact on what we're doing and can have a big impact on dental practices in general. The challenging thing about the dental lab business, every single case is unique.
Yeah.
Every single case is a world of its own. Every single case is a world of its own. Sometimes those worlds are simple.
Yeah, the exception really is the rule.
And sometimes those worlds they got forests, they got trees, they got oceans, they got sometimes those worlds are very complicated.
Yeah.
And as a consequence of that, our business, there needs to be a lot of people who are very smart and very trained and skilled in lab tech work in order to deliver a really high quality outcome to our customers every single time. I think AI is very interesting because of two things. Number one, it enables me to take these very skilled people and dramatically increase the reliability of their output. I can use AI to make sure every case that a lab tech produces is really high quality. I can also save them time. So one lab tech who could previously do 10 cases maybe can now do 15 or 20 in the same time span. But I think more importantly than that, the real thing that's compelling about AI is it offers the possibility that you can take, I think this is the key thing for dental practices, for everybody and frankly in healthcare. AI means that you can take a problem that previously required 3 people, 3-body problem, and now with AI, maybe it only requires 2 people, or maybe, depending on the context, maybe only 1 person. And that's really exciting. Perfect example. You want to submit a scan to your dental lab. You want to know if your scan is good enough that it's not going to get rejected. This harkens back to the example I gave a few minutes ago. AI can tell you right then and there if the scan is good or not good. Prior to AI, you would have had to call and get on the phone with a lab tech who would look at the scan and tell you if it's good or not good. AI turns that from a 2-body problem, dentist and lab tech, to a 1-body problem, which is just a dentist. And in any context, whether you're talking about healthcare, you're talking about larger like big tech companies, talking about any corporation, any system of people trying to achieve a goal, if you can achieve the same goal with 1 less stakeholder, you're going to be able to achieve that goal faster, more effectively, and probably more reliably if the AI is really good. That, to me, I think is the real power of AI in the context of healthcare and dentistry in particular, is you can take these challenges that, might require a dentist, a dental hygienist, and a lab tech, and maybe one other person. That's four stakeholders. And maybe with AI, depending on what the problem is, you can reduce that to 3 or 2. And now the people who are no longer having to do that can now spend their time on higher value work that is less easy to automate and probably more important for different patients.
Yeah.
I'd rather have our lab techs spending time, carefully designing really important, high quality cases and touching up ones that the system gets wrong, then hopping on calls with doctors to tell them that there's like holes in their scans that like we all know a computer can tell you.
And how do you think about that in the context as like a DSO exec? They're thinking about their P&L. Like, where do you think that renders through for them? Does it actually create an ROI, or is it more hype?
I think it's gonna be pretty big. I'm like the first one to say when like a tech thing is just like a hypey tech thing that we should not really be talking about. I've been very vocal about that in the past. I think there's real things that AI can do for DSOs. Big things. I mean, Joe, like the AI scanner view example, I hate to beat a dead horse, but that one by itself could save a DSO so much. Like just reducing the number of times patients to come back in.
Yeah.
Or like to give a non-dandy example, right? If you can use AI to, if you're a DSO, right? I think one of the big problems DSOs have from my, conversations I've had with DSOs has been inconsistency across dentists and dental hygienists across your practices. You don't want one dentist at location A to have, let's call it, a really conservative style of dentistry, and then another dentist at location B to have maybe a really aggressive one. You'd kind of want to be standardized, right? If you're already practicing digital dentistry and you have intraoral scans and digital X-rays and all these things, you can throw a layer of AI on top of that, of AI diagnostics, and immediately standardize the way in which you practice dental healthcare across your practices. And not only that, you can then, even if you want, and then you can see exactly in a measurable way how your dentists are deviating from that standard. I mean, it's beautiful. it's glorious. I mean, I don't own a DSO. Very noticeably, I don't own a DSO.
Yeah.
But if I did,
you do not.
I do not. But if I did, like I'd be really hype about that. That's a really big deal. I think the real challenge in dental care and healthcare more broadly is you got this like limited supply, and you got all this demand coming, and you gotta support, but you got limited supply, and DSO owners know very well, especially like when a dentist quits or when you're trying to add a new location, how challenging that limited labor supply of talented dentists can be for them. You got limited supply. You got all these patients coming in. They're all going to be leaving reviews and saying things about your business and making decisions on whether or not to pursue treatment within your locations. And your big thing as a DSO that you're thinking about is, how do I grow? And again, from outside looking in, based on my conversations, it sounds like one of the biggest challenges for growth is, how do I reliably add people to my business that are going to perform the same level of quality of service as the existing people I already have, and be able to like communicate to patients as well as my existing people can, and maintain this sort of cohesive brand that I have. And, you can only get so far with really high quality, interviewing and screening, but on the job technology that is like a reference point that you can like benchmark people against to see when they're deviating and then deliver like feedback immediately.
Yeah.
That's like the gold standard. And again, I don't own a DSO. Like I really don't own a DSO, but like I already see that. We already see that with the skilled technicians on our team.
Yeah.
Being able to have a reference point for them is just really important.
From your standpoint and what you're observing now as you're building the team, you talked about AI scan review. Are there other areas where you're seeing automation in the lab being able to deliver ROI and financial outcomes to a DSO?
I don't know, Joe. You have something in mind?
I think we're pushing much further into AI, but also I think it's the interdisciplinary engineering work that we're doing that is actually allowing us to, I think, tangibly deliver end product to a customer that is more consistent quality can be presented to a patient and a doctor at time of checkout, and I think does deliver a higher standard of care, which I think drives repeat visits, drives repeat sales from customers, and then allows you to compress appointment time so you get more chair time out of that.
I think we're doing a lot of good stuff. I think we're doing a lot of good stuff that I think DSO is going to be very excited to hear more about next year when it rolls out. So Joe, Navy bomb disposal squad to dental lab technology company executive. What's up with that? That's quite a pivot.
It was a pivot. I had some stops in between. I did a couple of years of school. I was a consultant before. And frankly, when I started talking to Dandy, I initially had no real interest in joining. The recruiter at the time reached out. And the thing that struck me about that conversation was how well the recruiter communicated what the company was doing. And
wow.
And so
it's a hard one.
That's a hard one.
It's a hard one.
It is not that common when you speak to recruiters. And I remember hanging up the phone and being like, that was interesting. And 4 months later, actually called Will at the time back and just to check in. Hey, how are things going? And felt like, well, I have to join at that point. And he continued to know about the business. I met the rest of the team. I interviewed with Tony, Len, the rest of the gang here, and felt it was an unbelievable place to work. And so unbelievable place to work. And what I found is the skills transfer quite readily, right? We worked on a crisis scenario, the anniversary of which is coming up next week on
yep.
Blue Screen of Death Remembrance Day.
That's right. Blue Screen of Death Remembrance Day.
You know, working at a startup, working at a high growth company, there are constantly challenges and new problems, new things to work through. And frankly, like the background in the Navy brings a lot of discipline, brings a lot of rigor, but also like ability to absorb change.
I want to hone in on this one a little bit. Navy bomb disposal squad to dental lab technology executive. Do you think being in Navy bomb disposal that experience specifically prepared you for your current role? Do you feel like, in other words, just so it's like very clear what I'm asking, do you feel like at Dandy you often find yourself disposing of bombs?
I have never once disposed of a bomb.
Literally.
Quite not literally.
Not literally, but do you find yourself disposing metaphorical bombs at Dandy?
I would say more often than not. I think the skill that you learn in the Navy, and it's not unique to EOD, explosive ordnance disposal, is you run towards the fire. You run towards the problem, and you're constantly trying to figure out, how do I de-risk this? How do I make this problem less impactful? How do I make it less of a fire? And you're always trying to mitigate risk, both to, in this case, the business, but in the Navy, it was life, limb, or property.
Yeah.
And you're constantly reassessing risk to understand, is this the biggest problem right now, or have I successfully mitigated it and I can come back to it later? That to me is really the skill set. Like there's always going to be a bigger bomb, a bigger fire.
Yeah.
And I think in Dandy, we've been working together for the last 4 years now. There's almost always a metaphorical bomb.
Yeah.
And to be the most impactful executive, you've got to run towards it.
Yeah. So one of the really big accomplishments that I know we had was we reduced the number of support tickets tremendously back in 2024. First question, why should anybody in our audience care about that fact?
For a group of executives, I think I would track it back to the conversation we were just having about how do you listen to and engage with your customers? Mm-hmm. Are you building an experience that your customers love and rave about? And a few years ago, I think when we looked at our support tickets, I think we were just very honest with each other. This is not an experience that I think either one of us or Tony was proud of.
How many tickets was it?
110 per 100 items.
So for every order we were getting
more than one ticket.
Crazy. Jeez.
Crazy. And
imagine if Amazon was so bad you had to contact support more than one time per order you submitted.
Great.
That's how bad it was.
You wouldn't keep ordering. And I think for a DSO, for a private practice, if your customer had to call every single time that they needed something, it wouldn't be a great experience.
Yeah.
If they had to ask every follow-up question because you didn't provide them with the care packet after they got their crown. Mm-hmm. If they had to ask, hey, can I, do I have to wait? Can I eat after this appointment? Right? You want to preempt and provide an expectation that you know what you're doing and you're able to proactively understand what a customer is going to ask for.
Yeah.
And so I think any business owner should care, because it's one of the places where you get the largest volume of customer feedback and insight into the questions that either we're not delivering or sufficiently answering today, or that we could potentially be answering in the future.
I also think, by the way, and so going to part 2 of this, and so it matters a lot. It's a signal of the health of your product. How did we do that?
Yeah. Well, let me back up one, because there's another part of this, which is CX, your support agents cost money.
Yeah.
So on your P&L, it will render as a line in your P&L.
That's right.
And so there's actually just value in eliminating customer support tickets, because you will just save dollars. It will accrue directly to your bottom line. And so I'll go back to that first question, and let me come back to your second question now, which is, there's no shortcut. We looked at like 10,000 tickets manually, and we categorized them. Clinical tickets, non-clinical tickets. And then we started breaking down, well, what did our agent do when those types of tickets came in?
Yeah.
And we had about 26 or 27 categories of tickets, and then different resolutions or dispositions that a CX agent would take.
Yeah.
And we started sizing them. Which of these are the largest opportunities for us to go fix for the customer?
Yeah.
And we looked at volume, which is which ones were customers loudest about.
Yeah.
And then second, and then we looked at volume, which was how much volume in terms of support ticket count was coming in.
Yep.
And then you prioritize it. And our goal was always to create better experiences for customers.
In our case, you let me know if you think this is wrong. I feel like a lot of the reduction came from adding technology in the right place.
Almost entirely powered by technology.
Almost entirely, yeah. And so as I think about that experience, we are not a unique company.
No.
In that we have CX tickets. Frankly, many people watching this podcast, many people watching this will probably have a similar headache when they think about just how much of their bottom line and frankly, how much of their patient experience is being degraded by those tickets. I'll tell you, in my experience, the best way to reduce those is with technology.
It's the only way that we found it.
Yeah.
And
like marketing to customers
does not work. Yeah.
Key insight.
Technology becomes the way and the lever by which you can effectively reduce tickets. And AI is all the rage right now. And you can use tech to disposition tickets and to like fundamentally reduce the number of tickets, but you can also iterate your product. And we iterated our product. We created a whole number of new workflows that allow doctors to self-serve on making changes to their prescription. And we found that doctors actually prefer those. They don't want to talk to people if they don't have to.
Yeah.
And so
most customers do not.
Yeah. No, I don't want to pick up the phone.
Yeah.
And so we created pathways for customers to do these things on their own. Not as a matter of reducing costs, but actually, can we create the experience that they want to work in and that works for their practice, that minimizes the amount of disruption and allows them to see more patients every day?
Yeah.
Dan, you're a founder.
I am, yes.
Tell me about management style. And I want to specifically hone in on this idea of dandy speed, which is, for those in the audience, like we value as a company being very responsive. Working quickly to solve problems. And one of those, that is easy to do as a 3-person company. How have you maintained and preserved that value as you've grown? Like one of the things we hear from DSOs is it was easy when we were 10 practices. It's gotten harder to do that at 20, at 30, at 50, at 400.
Yeah.
How do you think about that as a founder, as a leader?
I think one of the more important things you can do, and one of the more important things that we have done, is we have kept Dandy Speed not only as an explicitly stated company level value that is communicated out to everyone when they first join and many times after, but it's also something that is incorporated very deliberately into our candidate interviewing process. So there are like questions that are designed to assess that value that I will ask every single candidate, especially candidates applying for a leadership role, candidates where their behavior will be a model for other team members. I specifically have incorporated questions designed to understand that value.
Can you give an example
of a question?
Yeah, one of those questions.
Yeah, so common one. I'll often ask candidates, tell me something that you learned, something non-obvious that you learned, like an insight that you gleaned from either a customer conversation or maybe from a technology that you just discovered you can or cannot build or what have you. And I'll ask them specifically to give me one that's like useful, something that actually changed the way they, built their product or their strategy for whatever they were owning. And then I'll ask, how long after it was possible for you to have come up with that insight did you actually make the change?
Interesting.
Yeah. And that one often requires them to really think a little bit, because it's not when they had it, it's when could you have had it?
Yeah.
Between that moment when you actually made the change, because that gives you a sense of the iteration clock speed of that person, which is very important particularly in strategic roles. You got to be thinking, like, remember what I was saying earlier about reflection.
Yeah.
I think the best companies and the best people are constantly taking in information from signals and acting on that quickly. And so, yeah, I'd say that's one common one I use. But there's a bunch. I have like a rotating set of like 4 or 5, and I really try to incorporate at least one of those questions, if not multiple. I often ask candidates, what's the hardest thing you've ever done?
Interesting.
Yeah.
What are you trying to get out of that?
I think some candidates will describe a period of their life where they had to, really go out of their way to deliver something that required an insane amount of dedication and focus and energy and effort and speed. And many candidates will not indicate something that has resembled any of that, right? So, yeah, like I've gotten answers that are like, yeah, I had to work a Saturday one time, like 5 years ago.
Not hard.
I've gotten answers. I gotten a lot of answers that are not even really about working. Like, I had to like it was really stressful planning this like vacation for myself and these like 3 other people.
Also not hard.
Yeah. So, that's another discriminatory question there. I would say that this tries to discriminate between people who, have this like innate dandy speed, at least desire or willingness to do it, and people who don't.
And do you think that has, your style of interviewing, and as you've expanded this out to the company, because I know I actually asked those exact same questions. Do you think that has helped you scale the culture effectively? Oh
yeah, no, I actually think that it's been one of the core ingredients to scaling the culture effectively. I think without it, I think we'd be lost. I mean, the issue is, and I'm sure many in our audience who have managed teams have had this experience. You can change people, but you can't change them all the way. Mm-hmm. People can change, but they change slowly. And so it's pretty important if you want to maintain a culture of what we call dandy speed. It's pretty important people start out at least somewhat close to that value already. They don't have to, be like perfect embodiments of it. It doesn't have to be like their main thing, but you gotta make sure people are at least like not the polar opposite when they join. Cause you're not gonna take somebody who's on the other side and rotate them 180 degrees. That's just not how people are.
Yeah.
So no, that's been critical. That's been absolutely critical, in my opinion.
So one of the things that I know our audience cares about, the executives make hard decisions every day.
Yeah.
Hiring, firing, company pivots, choices in strategy and where to spend resources.
Whether not to buy a new location.
Yeah, exactly right. What are you looking for when you make those decisions? Can you give an example of the data you had at hand when you made a decision at Dandy?
Yeah. So I've already given an example of one hard decision, which was the decision to, sort of shut down that original business and start fresh. But I'll give one that was more recent for this. The first couple of years of Dandy's history, starting 2020, were really, really exciting for a lot of reasons. And one of the big reasons why Dandy was so exciting between 2020 and 2022 was just how fast we were growing. I mean, we grew so fast in those early years. We were really a crazy growth story. The tech people were very, very excited about us. And we get to the end of 2022 and, we have this business that is really great at growing. We haven't proven yet that we're great at, being very profitable. At that time, we were very, very unprofitable. We hadn't proven that we were great at, building even remotely close to the breadth of the experiences we're building today. I mean, at the time, we were not even proven we could build deeply technical, ML, AI, and CAD type technologies and products like we do today. And so our main thing was we were really good at growing. But we get to the end of 2022 and we realized that a core assumption of ours had been wrong. And that core assumption was we had assumed that we'd be able to scale the business on the basis of third-party labs all the way. Yeah. At that time, we were effectively 100% third party. We realized around then that was not working.
What signals did you have that it wasn't working?
The first signals were customer retention and churn. Okay. Churn was much higher than we wanted it to be. And it's a great signal, but it's also a laggy one. Yeah. So if you're seeing it in churn, it means you already kind of missed your opportunity to fix it, to fix the problem early. But we saw it in our churn. But it wasn't just churn. We also, we would do audits of cases.
Sure.
And we would see it in the cases themselves. I'd be looking at these crowns, these designs, these restoratives, and I would be dissatisfied by the quality we were sending at that point in time. And the last signal was the fact that at the time we had a lot of partner dental labs. I don't remember the exact number, but it was way more than the number that we thought we were going to have.
Right.
And it's very challenging. Even just from first principles, I don't have to look at cases to know. It's very challenging to manage quality and consistency across a large number of third-party labs.
Yeah.
And so we get to late 2022, we've got this really, really fast-growing business built on the basis of this third-party model and vision. And we're starting to get signals that third-party isn't working.
Yeah.
And that's a really tough thing. That was a really, really tough thing. Because what it implied was that we had built a large business on the basis of something that was unsustainable. That's a tough thing. That's a tough thing to really wrap your head around.
You don't have a business at that point. Potentially.
You have a business that is not the business you think you have.
Yeah.
You got something else. Yeah. And I think it was clear that we would have to I don't think we were really debating meaningfully if we were going to we knew the right thing for customers and for the business was to shift from 3P to 1P and to do this ourselves. That was not the hard decision. The hard decision was coming to terms with just how singularly important this was, so much so that we actually made the decision to do nothing else but this. In fact, we specifically made the decision to stop growing.
Yep.
To stop growing this business whose main thing for years was we're really good at growth. This business who for years, our whole identity was we were one of the fastest growing companies in the world. In early 2023, we decided, nope, no more growth. We're just going to dedicate all of the organization's time and energy to vertically integrating and making sure the product that comes out of that is absolutely fantastic. This was not popular among the venture capitalists, I can tell you.
Yeah. How did you frame that conversation? Our DSO execs, they're largely working with PE investors. Investors reward growth more than they reward cost takeout. How did you frame that?
There were definitely some tough conversations. But at the end of the day, I am one thing that is very exciting. One thing that I do appreciate about our cap table is our investors do have a lot of belief in myself and Tony. So, and they saw how strongly we believed in it, the conviction we had. And it's not like it was unreasonable. Like, you know, we did have, our investors definitely wanted us to have better margins. So, yeah, some tough conversations, but I think ultimately our investors' faith and trust in myself and Tony won the day there. But I think the real thing was that was an incredibly challenging decision. Taking the one thing the company was really good at, the one thing that everybody around the table on the investor side really wanted to keep seeing was the growth, and saying, no, actually, like we have not earned the right to grow and vertically integrate at the same time. Like that was just a level of excellence we had not felt that we had achieved. And we also we had not earned the right to treat the vertical integration as a second-class citizen or as a maybe. Like that we knew had to get done. It had to get done with extreme excellence. Yeah. Extreme excellence. It had to be so good that they'd write Harvard Business School case studies about it. The due to just how much of a turnaround, just how much of a transformation occurred on that part of the business. And so we made the really tough decision to singularly focus all the company's resources on, vertical integration and margin expansion and customer experience at the expense of growing for a year. And I think when you talk about what signals do I need to see from that, I think the churn certainly went a long way, but I'll tell you, I don't believe quantitative is enough to make these sorts of decisions. In fact, to be honest, I think like 7 times out of 10, what a customer is telling you with their words is if it contradicts with a metric, the customer is probably right.
Yeah.
7 times out of 10. And in this particular case, we had both some pretty important numbers saying something was wrong. We also had customers saying something was wrong. And we also had the unit economics of the business saying something was wrong. And I think those things combined created a strong enough impetus that although it was a hard decision, it was ultimately a decision that we made.
Yeah, it's been obviously a massive transformation within the business to vertically integrate. We have a site in Lehigh, another one in Provo, a third in Dallas. You just talked a bit about focus. And so you made the decision.
Yep.
Obviously with extreme focus.
Yep.
There's a whole change management effort that comes out of that. Can you talk about how the combination of focus really drove effective change management in that transformation? How you think about the importance of focus today?
I think even the most effective organizations often go through cycles of what I would call, let's call it exploration.
Okay.
And then focused execution. I mean, you see this pattern
everywhere.
I mean, you see this in the markets. You get exploration, in bull markets, then you get focused execution in the not so bull markets. But I think high quality companies go through this pattern of exploration and focused execution very often. I think what happened to us in 2023 was a much more extreme case that I don't think that's not going to be repeated. But the one part of that, which was the focus, I think that's something that we do think about. And the reason why I think it's so important to do this in sort of an alternating capacity, because you got to remember, like imagine it like imagine like you're mining for gold, right? I think, when you're mining for gold, you don't know where the gold is. There's a lot of ground to dig. There's so many places you could dig. You have no idea where the gold is. Mm-hmm. So what are you going to do? You're going to dig everywhere. Yeah. You're going to grab 100 shovels. You're going to hire as many people as you can, and just you're going to assign one person to every acre and just dig. And what happens as you do that is you're not, you're very spread out right now. You got one person for every acre. So you're not going to like really go that deep. You're not like taking home a haul right now. But what you are doing is you're gathering tons of really valuable information, indications, and signals about where are the pockets of gold. And so you do that for a year. You do that for 6 months to a year. You know, of your 100 acres that you're exploring, maybe like 3 of them, you're starting to see some stuff happening. Obviously, because you're so spread out, you didn't like really get that much from those places, but at least you're starting to see where the pockets are. So then the following year, you can take your 100 people and say, hey, like these 97 acres, not so valuable. These 3 acres seem to have some meat to them. Now let's allocate our resources and focus them on that small portion of our land. Yeah. You focus them, you go super deep, and you take home a huge haul. Maybe one of those 3 acres turns out to be the mother lode. I think it's a similar thing in business. I think it's a similar thing in frankly, in product. You don't know at the outset from first principles, or even from customer conversations, you don't know for sure what is the thing you're going to build in the next 12 months that's going to be the most impactful. And so you start out by just doing a lot. You go breadth first search is the term in computer science. You go exploration mode. Mm-hmm. You dig in a lot of different areas and you see what you find. You see what indications you can find, such that in the next cycle, after you've gotten that information, you now know with significantly more confidence where to make the really big investments, the real focused investments. And I think that happened in an extreme sense back in 2023. And I think that that's still something that we do even to this day is we make, you know, there was a quarter last year, or sorry, there was a quarter this year where the company was really oriented around just building as many things as possible. We built a ton of features, really breadth first search, really exploratory. And then now we're taking a little bit more of a focused approach based on which of those things that we built really resonated with customers. And so on the product side, we're sort of doing this pattern as well. I think it's a very important way. And that's how I think about focus. It's not like you can be permanently focused if you found one thing that is just like a mother lode that just keeps on giving. If you got a gift that keeps on giving, just sometimes you just do that. Yeah. And there are plenty of companies, they find one thing that works really well and they just keep doing it basically forever. And the gift just never stops giving. and to those companies, I say, you know, good for you. But for most people, it's going to be a constant exercise of exploration and then digging deep. And that's how I think about it.
When you think about building for DSOs now, where is Dandy focused?
Oh, that's a great question. I think to sort of reference what we were talking about a little bit earlier, I think one of the things that I've noticed from my conversations with DSOs is just how important it is to have really strong efficiency across all of your doctors and really strong consistency of quality across all your doctors. And so, you know, AI scan review is a really good example of a feature that, again, I think we've talked about before, that I think is really going to resonate with any DSO that's really thinking through, how do I keep my practice running efficiently and on time and delivering great patient experiences? You know, think about, how do I make sure I don't have to bring my patient back in for another appointment? You know, we launched, I think, this idea of reducing the number of appointments per case, really big thing. Yeah. Really, really big thing. If we can reduce the number of appointments that a DSO or really any dentist needs to deliver a high quality full denture, really high quality restoration, like on average number of appointments, I think that's huge value. And that's something we're investing in right now.
And from a value standpoint, where, in your opinion, like where does that render, where have we seen that render on a P&L for a DSO? Like how, ultimately you have to tie it back to some sort of investment outcome.
Yeah. I mean, it comes down to production per hour, right? Like if you have to spend 6 appointments to place a denture, right? Like that's, you know, do the math on how valuable, you know, you got a fixed number of dentists. Mm-hmm. You know, if each dentist is spending 6 hours to place a denture, you're going to be placing far fewer dentures than if that number is 3 appointments per denture. And that flows down into the P&L in the form of less production, significantly less production, and significantly lower margins on that production, right? Because, you know, for many DSOs, one of their largest expenses is their doctor labor. And so anything you can do to reduce the ratio of doctor labor to production, I mean, it's really key.
So I speak to a lot of DSO execs and general practitioners. One of the things that we see and hear often in our conversations is macroeconomic pressures are tough right now. Inflation is rising. The labor market has gotten extremely competitive and increases wages, and insurers are reducing their reimbursement rates.
Yep.
All of that contributes to obviously the DSO and the practice P&L, their margins compressing.
Yep.
What role do you believe technology has in alleviating some of that pressure for a DSO or a practice?
I think those trends are exactly the reason why technology is actually so important. It's not, I think at one point technology was optional. Like if I had to make a prediction, I think that practices that do not adopt technology in a meaningful way to solve these problems are going to struggle a lot more in the future than they have in the past.
That's broad. Like what do you mean specifically?
I think the way this manifests, I think it's diverse, right? For example, there are many things with Dandy where we're able to use the technology that we're providing to practices to help save them money, right? Like reducing appointments per procedure is a really great example of this.
Okay.
Right? Because of AI scanner view, I can reduce you having to have the patient come back in. Because of our digital workflows for full dentures, you go from 6 to 2 appointments for a denture, right? So these sorts of changes radically transform the economics of a procedure you're offering to your patients. To give just one example, I think practices are going to have to also really start to think about using technology to automate their workflows in their practice. I think that I think that right now, if you look at the market, there's a lot of people coming to market with really interesting tools for automating workflows on the back end, like PMS style workflows. Think like scheduling patients. You have like Next Health helping with automating that. You have a bunch of companies trying to help automate insurance workflows and RCM. I think right now these are optional for practices. I think over time they may become less optional. I think it's going to be really tough to run an inefficient practice in the future because of these things. But I think the converse of that is there's now more technology to solve these problems than there ever has been in the past. And so I actually think like with the right configuration of tools, if you play your cards right, running a practice can be way less stressful and feel way more productive and fulfilling than it ever has in the past. You know, it's less appointments to deliver the same patient joy. You know, it's less headcount, less people you have to manage, less busy work you have to deal with to get paid out by your insurance companies, right? So I think the flip side of this is I do think there is a world where if this stuff comes together in the right way for your practice, running your practice can be that much more enjoyable and maybe even more profitable, even with those macro headwinds.
You're a tech founder.
That I am.
In the selection of those tools, how do you evaluate or decide, hey, this is the right tool that we're going to build Dandy on, or that we're going to like effectively buy or build? Like, what are the decision criteria that come to mind as you start to like trade off some of those decisions for those investments?
For me, well, you mean for Dandy?
Yeah, or if you're a DSO, what advice
what
advice would you give to a DSO executive?
If you're evaluating a technology company's product for your practice, number one, I would really try to make sure they actually understand the problem that you want them to solve. This is more of a relevant concern if you're talking to like a smaller vendor or even a mid-sized one. I would make sure in particular that you can talk to other DSOs that are similar to yours, or other practices that are similar to yours that have used the product and felt like it wasn't just like a fun gimmicky technology toy, but actually it had real tangible impact on their practice. It's probably the number one thing I would recommend doing.
That makes sense.
What about you?
When we make tech decisions and buying decisions with partners at Dandy, I think we're always trying to align, I think, one, how deeply do they understand the problem? Mm-hmm. And then second, we're always trying to understand not just what can they deliver today, but what does their roadmap look like?
Yep.
Because there are different insights that you can glean from the same problem.
It's true.
And the actual thing that we found is the slope that technology company is operating on. Because we try to make decisions for a long time.
Yeah.
You remember we selected a CRM vendor for customer support chat, and it's been a great investment decision because it compounds.
Yeah.
And so being aligned on the right roadmap and understanding, okay, we think about the problem the same way. We have the same insight, and therefore our roadmaps can actually align further and deeper into the future.
This makes a lot of sense. Yeah, a company's roadmap can tell you a lot about their philosophy, and how they think about the problem that they're solving, even more so than the product that's right in front of you.
I detoured us there for a second, but before that, I asked around current trends and macroeconomic pressure and how it's really impacting today, and where digital adoption will drive in the next couple of years. Looking longer term, where do you see dentistry going in the next 10 years?
So a couple things. Number one, I think the trend away from specialization is going to continue. I think this, like the territorialization of orthodontists, the only ones who do orthodontic work, implant surgeons are the only ones who place all this sort of stuff. I think it's not going away, right? People who specifically went to school to be really, really high quality orthodontists will still be likely the highest quality orthodontist you can find as a patient. But I think the barriers will reduce. And in particular, I think, and maybe I'm a little biased from my own experiences, but in particular, I think for those really complex cases where it spans multiple different products that might be required to get to a patient's like final outcome, I think right now the walls are pretty tall.
Yeah.
And I think those walls will get lower. I think, if you're doing a multi-product case between an implant and crowns and like really important anterior crowns and clear aligners, I think we may find ourselves in a position in a few years where maybe if the clear aligner component is not so complex, or maybe the GP you're seeing happens to also really like placing it. Like, I think you might start to see a reduction in such specialization, especially for those complex cases where that specialization introduces a lot of friction and headache. So that's one thing. I think we're going to continue to see consolidation, especially among the larger DSOs. I don't think that. I think that's going to continue. I think one of the bigger things, and this might be a little more controversial, I think intraoral scanning is going to continue to grow a lot. I think digital is going to continue to grow a lot. I think we're going to get to a place in not so long from now where, frankly, intraoral scans become the default for dental care. I think right now, intraoral scanner adoption is not small. A lot of practices have it, but I don't think there are that many practices that see it as like the main thing you do in a prophylactic appointment. Appointment. On par with the dental X-ray.
Yeah.
And I think not so long from now, intraoral scans will be like a part of the core itinerary for a new patient for almost every practice. And so as a result, I think the shift to digital is going to continue. And then one other thing I would say is I think technology will save doctors more and more time as time goes on. I think we're already seeing it with the stuff that we've been able to build. I think we're already seeing it with many of the other products that are out in the market that are designed to save doctors and their staff time. I think practices will get more efficient, and as a consequence of that, they will need to be more efficient to keep up with competition.
Dan, you talked a lot about AI. AI is built by engineers, and I'd love to understand, how do you think about not just hiring, but really retaining world-class engineering talent?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think the key thing here is, on the hiring side, the most important thing in my experience has been holding a high bar and keeping the technology at the forefront of the hiring process. So making sure that, if we're interviewing for somebody who's going to be a machine learning engineer, for example, making the interview process very heavily oriented around, are you really good at machine learning? Are you very passionate about that discipline? I think this probably extends to a lot of technical roles, finding people who are like self-motivated and passionate about the core discipline versus just doing it because it's a job. I think it's a core thing we try to discriminate in our hiring process. Retaining, I think what it comes down to is, do you have really interesting problems to work on? And is the company's mission and progress really exciting? And I think that on the former point, I think we have some of the most exciting and interesting technology problems that an engineer on the job market looking for a role could find right now. We have on the machine learning side an extremely unique data set, solving really extremely unique generative 3D AI problems that I know for a fact nobody else in the world is trying to solve. We have on the CAD side, we're building really cutting edge in-browser collaborative CAD tooling that, again, in the context of healthcare, nobody's ever really tried to build before. So I think we have really interesting problems that we're solving. And then the company is just doing really important work. And I think people who come here really appreciate that they're actually having an impact on people's lives. And so I think the combination of really compelling problems, a company that is growing and succeeding financially, and solving really important problems for people, I think that's what keeps people here.
Tell me more about the mission, right? It's a dental lab.
Oh, yeah.
How do you think about Dandy in the context of what we're building for society?
So I think there's this core problem that we have as an industry in healthcare. It's pretty often on the news how unaffordable healthcare is becoming or has become for a lot of people. And when I think about why that is, what this comes down to is, we have increasing demand. We have an aging population, increasing demand for healthcare. And by the way, you really see this in our business with restorative care. A lot of our patients are elderly. And you have a supply of caretakers and a supply of people who can provide that care that is relatively fixed. It might be growing a little bit, but class sizes aren't exploding in medical schools, right? I don't think it's growing as fast as the demand. And, we're doing all this stuff to try to spread the cost around. And I think that's good stuff, but it's not solving the underlying problem, which is that the number of people that we have to take care of, the number of people who need care is imbalanced, right? And so I think what Dandy does, when I think about our role in the broader picture, we have found a specific part of healthcare where there's actually not one set of limited supply, but there's actually two. And most people don't realize this. There's a limited number of dentists who are high quality, who can do the thing you need them to do. And then there's also a limited number of dental lab techs who are high quality, who can make the restorative that you need them to make. And so it's a unique situation. It's actually you're actually being hit with a double whammy. You might get poor care, even though you chose a great dentist, and not know why. And so the way I see it is we're using technology. I think the big impact that I think we're going to have on the dental industry for decades to come is we're using technology to effectively take that first supply bar and scale it to infinity and bring incredibly high quality to that infinite supply. And so no longer when you go to a dentist will you have to find both high quality dentist and hope that he or she found a high quality lab tech. That latter supply problem becomes fully solved. And I think that's going to, I think the entire industry is going to breathe a sigh of relief as that tension, like a muscle, I think the tension when this happened, I think this is going to relax.
Yeah.
And people will suddenly just feel like dental care is more affordable, higher quality, just goes better every time, takes less of your time, lower friction. It's just going to feel better. And I think that's a really amazing thing that we get to do for humanity permanently with tech. That's the beauty of technology. You R&D, you invent something that's never existed before, and then it just gets to exist forever. Once technology exists, it doesn't really go back in the bottle. And in the context of our industry, I think we can take an industry that's been supply constrained since its conception over a century ago, and for the first time in human history, no longer have it be supply constrained. And I think that's really cool.
Super cool.
I think that's really cool. I think that's the main way, we go and solve, what is ultimately a really tough pain point for a lot of people in this country right now.
Last question, Dan.
Yeah. So digital dentistry is not just about the technology. I just talk a lot about the technology, but it's not just about the technology. What's a really compelling, more human story that you've seen that's come out of this?
I think often tech makes things easier. My favorite story is Dr. Mark, who you know well, in New York. Dr. Mark is, I think he's 61. And really on the edge of retirement. And I think he was on the edge of retirement. He was burned out on dentistry. He had been burned many times by his lab techs. And
limited supply.
Limited supply. And he's obviously one of our customers now.
Yep.
But you go in and he's just lighter. He's joyful.
Yep.
And he expressed it as, I get to do what I want to do. And I think before that, he was, as you talked about before, just constantly not sure of what the outcome would look like.
Yeah.
And therefore experienced many of the additional pressures of not just being a dentist, but working with a lab tech to get the right outcome and running a small business.
Yep.
And those pressures really compounded. I think that is my favorite story. He's also the one who placed my implant and restored my implant crown. And, it's amazing to see someone at really what is the tail end of their career be re-energized, and he has no plans to retire now. I think it's bringing joy back to the craft and allowing people to specialize and really continue to hone it later in their career.
That is a pretty phenomenal story. I was not expecting to come up with such a good story on the spot, to be honest.
I spent a lot of time with Dr. Mark.
Yeah, true.
Thanks for joining. Dan, thank you for coming. Thanks for spending time talking about Dandy.
Happy to be here.
I'm Joe Lynch, host of The Margin Line.
And I'm Dan, guest of The Margin Line.
Check us out at meetdandy.com.